Hey guys, Scott here again. I'm going to kind of piggyback on the last video I posted on wit beer. Remember wit beer being white beer, Belgian variety, wit meaning white, to talk about Weissbier, which is kind of the German version of white beer. And both are wheat beers. And there's a lot of different styles of wheat beer. Maybe if I'm doing this for another 30 years, I'll have to go through every single style. But they're both wheat beers. And the German variety, which I'm going to talk about today, is called Weissbier. Again, white beer. Inside Bavaria and Germany, you'll see Weissbier used more often. So if you're at your local brew store, you'll see Weissbier used more often. Outside of Bavaria, Germany, sometimes you'll see Hefeweizen. Same beer. Okay, so if you see it up and they're sitting side by side in your beer store, Hefeweizen, Weissbier, and you're looking for that, don't panic. They're both the same beer. So sometimes I just try to give you tips when you're buying things. I know some of you have a lot of experience, some maybe not as much of experience with the terms. The one I have today, which I'll just talk about in a second, I may do a quick piggyback video on this right after this, Erdinger Weissbier. It's in a can. Remember I said I like beers in a can. Interesting as this may be, but a lot of times this beer is better served in the bottle. It is bottle conditioned. There will be a yeast sediment at the bottom. I'll try to pour this one nice and slow when I pour to see if there's a yeast sediment. I haven't poured a can version in a bit. So remember, with bottle conditioning, the yeast will act on the beer when it's packaged, produce CO2. It goes up to the cap or the cork, hits the beer again until the pressure is distributed above the beer line as well as into the beer. You'll create the carbon dioxide. With that, though, it produces a yeast sediment at the very bottom. And there's some advantages to that yeast sediment, which I talked about with aging of beer, with the preservative factor of it. And again, if you happen to pour it into your glass, it's not a big deal. If you're being served it at a bar, a lot of times they'll ask you if you want the yeast. It's not like sludgy or anything. You know, sometimes people get freaked out by it. But in the bottle, a lot of times you'll be able to see that. And if you don't want it, like if you've ever had my homebrew, you pour it in, you can watch the line of yeast come up, and just before you do it like kind of in almost one consecutive pour, and then you tilt the bottle back and you can leave the yeast behind. In this style, you know, unless the yeast have gone through autolysis and producing like meaty flavors and things like that, umami flavors, you may want to pour it right in. And that's commonly, if I have in the bottle version, that's what we'll get. You know, wheat beers is the second wheat beer in a row that I'm talking about. You know, they've been around for about 7,000 years. If I remember correctly, the Sumerians, I think, were the first one. I'm not going to dive too much into the full history there. Some of them may be a little rusty on it. But in Bavaria, or actually in present-day Czechoslovakia, there was a family, the Degensberg family, I think, got the rights. There was a Wittelsbacher dynasty. Those of you who are German, you may know this. You're going to know this history a lot better than me. They bought the rights to wheat beer because there was a, you know, they didn't really know the value of wheat at the time, and this family bought the rights to be able to brew wheat beer. And what really happened, and I don't want to blur the history, but there's a purity law, a German purity law called the Reinheitsgebot, which told them they could only use malted barley, water, and hops. Yeast didn't come on until about the 1700s because they didn't know yeast was even fermenting the beer at the time. They didn't understand the concept of it. So it was just, again, hops, barley, water, and then eventually yeast got added on later. So you couldn't use wheat in the early stages, okay, of beer history, at least in Germany. But this family, they changed the law around a little bit, and the Bavarian law was different than the German law. Okay, and if you really want to get into the history on it, you can kind of Google it if you're interested in that. But this family got the rights to use wheat to make the beer. The Wittelsbacher royalty family, I guess I'll call them that, they didn't realize the profits that could be made using wheat and how much it was going to take on. They actually disparaged the beer, saying it was just something for people to get drunk on. It had no nutritional value. And I know we kind of laugh when we hear nutrition, but we talk about the monks, the Trappist monks or monks in general, using it as a nutritional supplement to their body. So anyway, this family had the rights to, and they're producing the beer. Well, we'll just say the patriarch of the family died, and the Wittelsbach family took over again around the 1600s, I believe it was, 1700s. And eventually they sold the rights to the Schneider Weiss family. And Schneider Weiss is kind of the, I guess, the present day early historical family that is known for making wheat beers now. So if you ever see Schneider Weiss in the store, that's kind of the original family. So it kind of went in a big circle. I could be, blurring it slightly, but if you're really interested, it's very easy to find that information out. So remember, Weissbier, Weiss means white, beer obviously means beer. Hefeweizen, Hefe means yeast, as I said. Weizen means wheat. This beer is going to be about 4.3 to 5.5, 5.6% alcohol, if I remember correctly. The other thing that this is going to be made out is going to be made from Pilsner malt, about 50%. And by law, since it's a wheat beer, it has to use minimum 50% wheat, malted wheat. Okay, most of the German varieties have more than 50%. Okay, hops is not very important in this style. It just balances out the sweetness a little bit. They probably use German noble hops like Tettnang or Mittelfrüh hops. And the yeast, though, is very important. They use a Weihenstephaner yeast that we use in home brewing. First time I ever used it, I almost thought there was a problem. I had renting an apartment, I did it, and it was producing all these crazy smells. I thought I ruined my first batch of beer. But they call it the Weihenstephaner strain of yeast. Now, there's two things that are important about that strain of yeast. It produces something called ferulic acid when it's mashed around 112 degrees when we mash the grains. So I should say that when the yeast eat the ferulic acid, it produces what they call 4-vinyl guaiacol. It's a compound that gives you the strong clove smell and taste. All right. It's also going to produce isoamyl acetate, which gives it a banana. So you can already tell when I pour this beer, if it's fresh, it's going to give a nice clove, banana aroma as well as flavor. Okay, so again, the mashing at about 112, 113 produces that acid, and this particular strain of yeast will produce those favorable products, if you like that style. It is a ale, okay, so it's what they call top fermenting yeast. Saccharomyces cerevisiae is the actual thing. Those of you that have Latin. Pasturionis is the lager yeast, which is bottom fermenting, okay? So this is going to give you esters, floral esters from the banana, phenolic things from this 4-vinyl guaiacol, from the ferulic acid that's being eaten by the yeast. It's going to be very pale straw, which I'll show you in a second when I pour this beer. But again, Germans have more strict standards to beer styles than, say, the Americans do. So that's why a lot of times you will, see, them stick to style guidelines a little bit more. Okay, you're going to see Weihenstephaner. I said Erdinger, Hofbrauhaus is another common brand. You will see some domestic versions. Let me just talk about if you see American wheat beers. Okay, sometimes they're mislabeled as Hefeweizen. Okay, they're even in microbreweries. I see they say Hefeweizen. They don't use the yeast that produce the clove and banana. Those are more American wheat beers. You can enjoy them. Blue Moon is more like that, American wheat. Okay. It's not a Hefeweizen, all right? So sometimes they mislabel it. You can always message me if you're not too sure about that. But so that's more of an American wheat, very similar color. It's still going to be cloudy. It's still going to be a very enjoyable style. It will have a little bit more hop character there, more citrus, fruity type of hops to it. And like I said, this German Weissbier, hops you're not going to get much hop aroma. You're actually hopefully going to get the clove and the banana, the flour, wheat bread, white bread aroma and flavor from the malt from there again. And then of course, but this is going to be more heavily yeast derived. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to crack it open here. Remember, this is Erdinger. Okay, So let's just crack this open. Now, before I even pour it, okay, this is going to create, this is usually very highly carbonated. So you usually want a Weissbier glass. Now, I wish, my heart broke about a year ago. I had when I was in Challenge Roth in Roth, Germany, I did a triathlon, and I was drinking Frankensteiner, again, I might be mispronouncing it, beer, like all week. And I had a nice branded Weissbier glass. But you want something tall like this, okay? And like I said, you want to do it in about a 1 to 2 pour thing if you want to, depending on if you want the yeast. So you want to have a lot of space for the head of the beer, right? Hopefully this one's not the most freshest can I could ever have. And I'm going to talk about that in a short 5-minute video later. But you want that taper at the bottom, top. You want it to have a lot of room for the head, okay? Especially when you have a fresh bottle and you want to pour it in. So you want a glass like this. If you don't have a glass like this, put it in a large size tulip or something like that. But you definitely want to get a lip like this to help support the head. You don't want this head draining down like Bud Light, okay? You want to get that aroma, all right? So again, I'm going to pour this now, okay? I'm going to aggressively pour, okay? I'm not going to do the old 45-degree angle thing with this, okay? Because I want that head. I may have to have this settle a little bit because I'm trying to do this with one hand. Okay, I'm going to let that settle a little bit. I may even just talk a bit. So you can see I got a lot of head there, okay? Now, while we're waiting for that to settle down just a little bit, you know, pairing with this, I didn't mention it with the wit beer, but a lot of wheat beers, you know, people do mimosas at brunch. Wit beer, Hefeweizen is a nice change up for your brunch, breakfast, okay? Having it. This would pair great with your taco dishes again because of the spiciness from the yeast and the clove. You know, some chicken dishes, but chicken tacos, Spanish dishes sometimes with that. Okay, so you can see again, this is going to be a nice. Again, I'm still waiting for some of the head to. I apologize for the aggressive pour because I'm trying to do this within about 15-minute video. But you can see this is another very pale beer. Okay, so when I take a whiff of this, and this is why you want the head, because you want that aroma. Yeah, so I'm definitely getting the clove and the banana. A little more banana in this than clove. A lot of them will be more biased to clove, and that has a lot to do with fermentation temperatures too. The higher the temperature, a lot of times, is more of the banana you'll get, and a little lower, more of the clove, if you're a home brewer. Okay, and I am getting that wheat, white bread, cracker malt. Now I'm going to take a sip. Again, you can see there's a lot of carbonation. It's very refreshing, okay? Again, this can, I'll tell you right now, if you go on my Facebook wall, isn't the most freshest can, but it still has that clove and that banana. Medium kind of to light mouth feel. Another crushable variety, a lot of wheat beers are because they're lighter. You may see this sold as Dunkelweiss, okay, or Dunkelweizen, just like Hefeweizen or Weissbier, but it's a darker version. They use Munich malt. It's a darker malt. So it almost has the same aroma, has a little bit more of a caramel type of flavor and taste, maybe a toast type of flavor to kind of give it a little more body. Not body, but a little bit more bold maltiness profile. So again, 4.3 to 5.6% alcohol. Weissbier, drink it side by side with your wit beer if you're trying to look at the different styles. And light fare, breakfast, try it out. But try to get them as fresh as you can and check your can out, okay, to make sure the dates are good. All right, so, and there's also one called Crystal Weizen, which they actually filter it so it's not as cloudy as this one is, okay? And this is probably a little less cloudy than usual. So again, hopefully that was informative, guys. Thanks for all the feedback. And until the next video, sometimes I'm going to produce them very rapidly like this last week. Sometimes I'm going to be taking a little bit of a break, okay, depending on what beers I have laying around. Have a great day, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.